All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. This is our next edition of Pre-Law Lunch and Learn with your host, Amber White. I'm being extra dramatic, but so happy that all of you are able to join us. With us today, we have attorney Michael Watson. He is a UTA alumnus and he is an attorney practicing out of Houston. I don't want to steal his thunder because I know he's going to give us a little bit of his background, but he is a wonderful attorney, and I'm so excited for you guys to get to know his story. And beyond that, he and I had a chance to get to work together earlier this year when we hosted our moot court invitational, and he is anybody that's interested in moot court. He's got a lot of moot experience, so just uh, uh, please keep that in mind when he's speaking. Anybody that has questions, please do put those in the chat. Keep yourself on mute. Keep your cameras off. We will make sure to get those questions that you have addressed. So feel free to just fire away. And with that, I'm going to allow Mr. Michael Watson to go ahead and give us a little bit of his detailed background and tell us who you are. What do you do?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the Lunch and Learn series. As Amber said, first and foremost, I'm a UTA graduate. Graduated from UT Arlington in '96. I kind of took the long path through undergrad. I worked and put myself through school. Not 100% certain of what my plan was. I kind of started off pre-med and then decided that I wanted to do the law school thing. So I changed my major, and it took me a little longer to get out of UT Arlington than I thought it would and expected it to. But then went to South Texas College of Law, graduated South Texas in '99. Dr. Nur, Charles Nur, is the person who encouraged me to apply and go to South Texas, which short of getting married was probably the best decision in my life. I absolutely loved my 3 years there. Um, I participated in the moot court program at South Texas, which I will say is the best moot court program in the country, and went and clerked for a couple different firms, and then found myself practicing in litigation, trial and appellate litigation, and I've been doing that for about 20 years now. Um, I've worked at mid-sized firms, small firms, and then from 2005 until about 8 weeks ago, I was on my own. And then 8 weeks ago, joined a firm based out of Corpus Christi, and I'm about to start managing their Houston office once we get it developed, and we'll probably have 20 to 25 attorneys in Houston, which will be, I guess, under my direction. So,
I think that's awesome. I'm sorry. I think that's so awesome. You guys, in case you didn't pick up on what he said, you're talking to a boss. He's about to be the managing partner of a firm, and we are honored to be speaking with him. But I do want to talk a little bit first about your solo practice and the time that you spent running your own practice by yourself. So, first, why did you choose to operate as a solo practitioner?
I think the biggest reason is so when I was at firms, we did a lot of stuff on contingency fee basis. And, that's we don't get anything unless you win. And I was on a bonus structure of here's a decent base salary and it's enough to kind of, keep you there. And then you'd get, somewhere between 10 and 15% of the net fee that came to the firm. So we were working on some really large projects, like some really large mass tort projects where, the fee to the firm would be 7 figures. And, my 10%, while is a nice bonus, wasn't the money that, if I'm doing all the work, I felt like I should be earning more than I was getting. And it turned out that moving and doing the work on my own was a good decision, which is why I did it for the past 15 years. So really, it was just financially based. It was, if I'm doing all the work, well, I'm only getting 10 to 15% of really what was uh, the fee.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So tell us a little bit about your practice areas. What did you practice while you had your firm up and running?
100% litigation. Well, 95% litigation. Trial and appellate work. A lot of personal injury, commercial litigation, breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, um, business disputes. Company A did a bunch of work for company B, and they were supposed to get paid, $1 million, and company B pays them 500, says you didn't do all the work, you didn't do it right, and it goes to trial, or it goes to, litigation, and you either get it resolved pre-suit, or you find yourself in front of a judge and a jury and trying that case.
Okay, so for those people who have no idea what it is, what is the difference between trial work and appellate work? You said trial and appellate. What's the difference?
So, trial work is in front of a judge or a jury, a single judge or a jury at the county court or district court level. That's the initial. You go down, you file the lawsuit. It's kind of the Judge Judy or the I can't think of the practice. I can't remember their names, but um, it's where you get to go and you make these fun arguments in front of a jury, and you've got witnesses on the stand, and you're presenting evidence. You get to cross-examine people, and you've got a jury of either 6 or 12 who are the fact finders of, did company A perform the work properly? And if so, what are the amount of damages that they should be paid because company B didn't pay them? Or who's at fault in this auto accident? Or, they get to make those decisions. So that's the trial level. And, somebody wins and loses, and there's a judgment in favor of somebody or against somebody. If you believe, or if the parties believe that an error was made at the trial court level, then it goes up on appeal. And so that goes to one of the 14 district courts of appeals. It just so happens that the 1st and 14th districts are in Houston. So at that point, everything is tied to what's called the record. So only things that are admitted into evidence are considered by the appellate court. And then the appellate court takes the record and looks to see if the proper standard of law was applied to the facts to reach the final judgment, or if there are any errors in the record, if the judge should have considered something and didn't, or if there was an insufficiency of the evidence to affirm the judgment, or if the judge just misapplied the law. And so that's the appellate side of it. And I did a lot, like I said, I was on one of the appellate advocacy teams at South Texas. Actually, I was on several appellate advocacy teams at South Texas. And so I came out of law school doing a lot of appellate briefs. And I kind of like that side of it, because it's the part where I think it's more intellectually honest. You're tied to a record. The facts are what they are.
You're just arguing the law, right?
You're arguing the law, and you're arguing the application of the facts to the law.
Right. Exactly right.
And so there's no grandstanding of, who the best lawyer is, or getting the jury to like you. And it's not the jury likes you, so your client wins. It's, I'm right, and here's why, because here's what the law is, and the judge was wrong. And then when you go back to the trial court, the judge is always, I believe you get a little more respect after you've had a judge reversed. And I've had a fair number of judges reversed, and it's kind of a good feeling.
I can imagine. It's just a ha, you were wrong.
Sure. But I'll also tell you, the flip side of it is the judge that you go back in front of later after you've had them affirmed, they also know. So at the trial court level, you've got judges, and some of them are really good, and some of them aren't, because we have elected judges in Texas, right? And the general public knows nothing about who these judges are. And I mean, they'll elect somebody based on name or party or just some randomness. But the appellate judges, they've all served, or most of them have served, at a trial court level, and so they kind of know, what's going on, and they're ruling on issues of law. So it's a little, like I said, it's a little more intellectually honest. But the judges at the trial court level, they look to you to protect them. They look to the attorneys to protect them on appeal. And so if I've had a judge reversed before, he or she will look at my argument the next time I'm in front of them and give it a little more credibility. Like, okay, if I rule against him or his client, is he going to take me up on appeal? And if he does, what's the likelihood of success? And they worry about stuff like that because no judge wants to get reversed.
Right. No. That makes perfect sense. You have to respect that. And I, one thing that you said that I enjoyed, you said that in appellate court, it's not about being likable or making sure that the jury likes you or enjoys. In mock trial, I'm sure anybody that's in mock trial knows that I harp all the time how important at the trial level, especially if you got a jury, they have to like you. But at the appeal side, that doesn't matter. The judge, whether the judge likes you or not, doesn't matter when you confront him with what the law is and what the law says. They just have to bow down in the face of that. I love that. I did see a question. So one of the students actually asked, once you mentioned that you're working out of your Corpus Christi based firm, whether or not you're taking your clients with you from your private practice over to that firm. And if not, I'll piggyback on that question. What happens with those clients?
What happens to them? So I'll tell you an interesting story. So there was a firm in San Antonio that actually recruited me to go work in their San Antonio firm. And part of the deal was, I will if I can take my clients. And so I had multiple conversations with one of the managing partners there, and it was, oh, absolutely. But then when it came down to the actual getting it done, they said it creates too much liability and we're not going to let you do it. So I said, okay, fine. I'm a solo. I've been, solo forever. And these are some cases that I need to resolve, but also there are some long-standing clients that I have that I can't get rid of. I mean,
right.
I represented them in litigation matters 15 years ago. And so now every contract that comes through their door, they're having me review because they don't want to fall into the same problems or have the same issues that they had 15 years ago where they had to hire a lawyer and, pay an astounding fee through litigation when it's something that they can pay on the front end. I mean, so pay me, I'm just going to make up numbers here. Okay. So pay me $5,000 to review your contract now. So you're not having to pay me $100,000 to go try it later. I mean, it's an ounce of prevention.
Oh, 100%. And really, when you get a lawyer, that's what it is. It's a preventative measure. It's just like when you get a doctor. You pay the doctor a small fee to check your ears and your nose and your eyes so that, we don't have, heart disease and kidney disease later on. So that makes perfect sense.
And that's it. And that's why I said about 95% of my practice is litigation, because that other 5% is preventing litigation for clients that I've had through litigation. Interesting.
I do see that there are other questions.
But I didn't answer his question. So the Corpus firm is letting me bring my clients in the cases that I have. So I'm going to resolve the cases that I have separate from the firm. And then the 3 or 4 clients that I have are corporate clients. And the firm has zero interest in them. And they're just going to let me handle those on the side as a counsel deal. So
perfect. Well, at least you get to, keep those contacts. And so how does it work? Do they have to pay whatever fee structure your new firm charges, or do they get to keep working with you with the different rate? Like, how does that work?
So I've got them all at my old rate. And actually they pay me separate from paying the firm. So the cases that I have are completely separate from firm cases.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It
That's a
is
good deal.
fantastic. It was a very
That's a
good
very
deal.
good deal. Okay, so we had another question. How much of a learning curve, if at all, did you have going from working for someone versus having to run and manage your own cases? And I guess it would be reversed. How, well, let me ask you this. Did you first work for someone else and then start your own practice, or did
Yes.
you? Okay, so then yeah, her question applies.
So coming out of law school, I worked for a small firm. Then I went to a larger firm before going back on my own. And so learning her, I don't. Can they unmute?
Sure. I would just say if they would like to.
Oh, so I guess the question is learning curve from an office management standpoint, or learning curve, because the types of cases that I worked on were still the same types of cases that I work on individually.
Okay.
So
And well,
as a solo, it's the same types of cases. From a management standpoint, um, there's a fair learning curve, because now you're having to deal with stuff like finding office space, paying
right.
rent, hiring staff, and being able to manage doing the money management side of it. Because when I was at a firm, it was okay. I need a paralegal, and she's going to cost me $65,000. He or she's going to cost me $65,000. And I just throw that in the budget, and somebody else is cutting the checks.
Hmm.
But on my own, it was, when you become the person cutting the checks, uh,
You don't ask for
it's
help as much. Oh, I get it.
it's different. You really feel the responsibility of, I'm paying for somebody else's livelihood.
Mm.
Um, you know, like if like the firms that I was at, we had multi-million dollar budgets. So to throw in another $65,000 was nothing for them. Where on my own, if I'm bringing in, then again, I'm just making up numbers, $650,000. Okay, 10% of that's going to staff. In addition to payroll taxes and rent and case expenses and various things.
Right. Well, important consideration. So tell us, what would be the makeup? Well, and I was saying theoretically, but I guess you could tell us what the makeup of your practice was. Did you have paralegals? Did you have legal assistants, interns? How did you structure it?
So it depends on the cases that I have in my current docket. So I would ebb and flow with what I had. So I would have a firm that would call me and say, and again, as a solo, hey, we want you to come manage a docket for us and tell us what you need. And so I would staff five contract attorneys and 15 or 20 paralegals to manage a particular docket that this firm called me in to come manage. So I'm not an employee of the firm, but I'm working on a consulting basis, staffing my own office to manage a docket for them. So one of the questions was, why did I go solo instead of doing it, in-house? In-house, they would have paid me half of what they pay me as a consultant
Right.
to do it.
Right.
And so I've kind of developed, this niche of being able to handle these large projects, and mass tort projects. And the learning curve for them is they would staff it with 3 or 4 lawyers in-house, where they've got to pay payroll taxes and, attorney salaries and kind of shooting in the dark, where I've done it historically and then come in and say, here's what I need. And they, pay me a larger percentage of the fee to come in and do it.
Right. Right. Well, that makes perfect sense. Um, and a lot of the decisions do have to be made on a case by case basis. I'm sure a lot of people did not know that. Um,
But generally it's me and a paralegal. And then
at the very least.
I'm in an office space where we have a receptionist that,
Hmm.
is shared by 7 lawyers.
Hmm.
So we have a receptionist, they do the phones, all the other stuff. And then I have a paralegal, and technically I shared my paralegal with another attorney as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And a lot of, believe it or not, to the students listening, a lot of attorneys do that. Will have their practice basically in the same complex with several other lawyers, and they're basically sharing the same office staff. It's a wonderful way to just utilize resources.
And I'll
So,
tell you another reason that we do it that way. So a lot of people said, well, why don't y'all just join up and have a 7 lawyer firm instead?
oh no,
So aside from the financial dynamics of it, and
yes,
who's earning what and paying what, there's a huge advantage to it where if a case comes to me by company A and one of their employees is being sued for something, or their company's being sued for something that the employee did, there are times when that employee needs his own counsel.
right.
I can't represent both the company and the employee,
Mm-hmm.
but I could walk down the hall and say, hey, John, this is a case that just came in the door. I'm taking the company. Can you represent the employee?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of having two firms that are in two different buildings or 20 miles apart doing that, the the employee's lawyer is in the office next door, and I can walk over and say, hey, what did he do? And we can start having those negotiations, and it's kind of a joint representation, with a mutual interest, even though we're two separate law firms. There's no conflict.
Right. And I was going to say, conflicts. There are some people that are known because they know that a firm can't represent you if you create conflict. So in family law, for example, if a husband and wife are divorcing, the wife can just literally go down or the husband can go down the street to different firms and conflict out so that the husband can't take the case. And so if you take a 7 attorney group that are all separate and make them one practice, you can't do what you just did,
Right. We would
because
all be conflicted out.
100% you're all associated with each other as
If
one
if
firm.
one member of the firm has a conflict, everybody in the firm.
Everybody has 100% correct. So,
I mean, you can
uh,
do Chinese walls and stuff like that, ethical walls, but it's a lot easier to just have separate firms, and I can walk next door to the guy and say, "Hey, I've got the company, take the employee," and we can just run it that way.
perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, guys, I see another question. I love that y'all are asking questions. This is so great. How much experience do you have working with international clients? So I see MNC or exports, imports. We might have to take this person off mute for this question. So the point of clarification was, is there a lot of work in that area or is it mostly local?
I'm trying to think if I have any international clients. I don't think I do. I probably have once or twice in my 20 years. Most of the international work is going to the much larger firms, because a lot of it is through arbitration. And
Mm-hmm.
there's an international court of arbitration in New York, and a lot of at least the stuff that I see, goes through international arbitration.
Mm-hmm. Um, so let me ask you this, kind of just jumping back into the structure of your solo practice. So when I had solo practice, I chose virtual over brick and mortar just because it eliminated overhead costs and all of that. What made you choose brick and mortar over a virtual experience?
Synergy. Um, I had a very good relationship with the lawyers that I officed with. In fact, I clerked for one of them
Oh,
when I was in law school. Um, and then I knew that they had an office space available, and I mean, really, it was cheap rent. It was cheap rent in a great building with really good lawyers, and so I just couldn't pass it up.
good deal. Good deal. So I know, and I just asked, that was probably more or less a question from Amber White than the students. I know that was one of the main considerations. We talked about cost and, paying salary, paying taxes, everything. And, overhead is just a huge issue. I'm curious what you think, solo practitioners are going to be doing going forward now that we have COVID. You know, is it still worth it to have brick and mortar over virtual experience since everything is now virtual?
Um, Again, I think it depends on the relationship. So I actually gave up my office in March
Mm-hmm.
when COVID started,
Right.
and before making a transition to a firm, because I found myself working from home. Actually, I didn't give it up in March. I gave it maybe a month or two into the
The pandemic. Yeah. Yes.
pandemic. But I found that working from home was really where I was. And so instead of having to pay the rent, my paralegal wasn't even going into the office. We were all doing Zoom and email and phone calls, and you've got a server set up so that you can access everything remotely. And it was, why am I continuing to pay rent? And then and my landlord, who was also a friend of mine, we did reduced rent for a little bit, and I was like, I'm just gonna give it up. And he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
fine, whatever. Um, he owns the building, he didn't care, and we still refer cases back and forth. It's like nothing has changed, but I just don't
Right.
have to rent anymore.
Right.
If in hindsight, could I have done it earlier? Probably. I mean, I probably could have given it up a year or two ago, and it would have made a big difference. I could have probably saved a bunch of money in rent, but
Hmm.
um,
I'm just curious because I know, with everything going virtual, it's impacting every facet of our lives in every profession. So, I know that you mentioned your new firm in Corpus Christi is now going to be not renovating. You said
yeah,
leasing some
looking for
space.
30,000 square feet of space.
Ah, yes, wow.
Yeah,
So yes, so they are investing fully in brick and mortar
and they are planning on having people going back in brick and mortar.
good. Well, I mean, I think it's good. I think we all should at some point be trying to work towards that. But so I know you mentioned one of the colleagues that you officed with was somebody that you clerked for in law school. So I'd kind of like to use that as a segue to talk about your law school experience. So you say you went to South Texas. You clearly love it.
Love it,
Clearly,
love it.
proud alum. I love to give students the real dish on school. So if you could, what were some things that you loved, apart from the advocacy program, loved about South Texas, but could have done without? Could, or not loved, but could have done, loved, and then separately, what could you have done without, or what did you not enjoy about the experience?
Both good questions. Loved the professors. Um, and it's funny because a friend of mine, after first year, he transferred from South Texas and ended up going to U of H.
Okay.
And he said the professors at South Texas were better than the professors at U of H.
All
He
right.
felt like the caliber of students at U of H might have been a little better than the caliber of students in South Texas.
Okay.
Um, the so I love the professors. I mean, they truly, truly care about making the students into good lawyers. Um, and I feel like we got both the practical side of training, where it's this school teaches you how to be a lawyer, and this school teaches you to think like a lawyer. Like you hear about the Ivy League schools, and it's more philosophical. And
You're right. Theory. They just
it's
teach you
the
theory.
theory, and they want to teach you to think like a lawyer. I think at South Texas, and maybe it's because I went through the advocacy program, that you get to both be a lawyer and think like a lawyer. Um, it was a great experience. They care about the students. What could I do without the expense? It was
Naturally.
it was expensive, but I think it's still on the lower end of the private law schools.
It
U of H.
is. It
So my
is.
friend who went to the U of H, his sole reason for going was, you know, he was number two in our class after our first year, so they were paying him money to go to U of H, and he was basically getting a free ride at U of H. Um, yeah, I would probably have done the same thing, but after the first year, my grades were good enough that I was able to get some scholarship money, which kind of helped with that burden. I think South Texas has a good financial aid program.
Mm.
There are a lot of lawyers who feel like we need to give back to the school, because obviously without the school, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't be able to
Right.
do what we do. Um, so, we give back. We give back where we can.
That's wonderful. Well, so it's funny. The cost, I think, was my least favorite part about law school too.
It,
Ugh.
yeah. I mean, you spend a fair amount of time after graduation paying
Yes.
student loan bills.
Yes. Well, so when we talk about law school, you got involved in the advocacy programs, and I mean, should these students, if any of them have a desire to be a solo practitioner, should they focus some of their law school experience on advocacy, or better yet, their college experience? What should they be doing with regards to the advocacy programs available to them?
I'm biased. I'm very biased. But I think it depends on what you want to do. If you want to be a corporate lawyer working in house, I'd focus on contracts and probably, honestly, foreign languages.
Mm.
Um, so when I went to law school, my plan was to come out and be an in-house corporate counsel, at a Fortune 500 firm. Um, make a steady salary and be happy with that. But I got into the advocacy program, and it was eye-opening at not only how much fun it was, but how much good you could do with that degree and with the knowledge and the skills that you acquire in law school. Where you can go out and actually, change the world. So,
Like
and I've been
that.
fortunate enough to have cases that, we have severely impacted the way things are made. I've done a lot of products liability stuff where we've sued major automobile manufacturers for product defects, and they change the way the car is made. I've done a lot of pharmaceutical litigation where you change the way drugs are either made, distributed, um, you know, recalls, things like that. I mean, I like to think that something I've done somewhere along the way has saved somebody's life.
It sounds like it. So I mean, along those lines, could you tell us just a little bit about maybe your most memorable case?
Um, God, I mean,
Or maybe what's your most proudest of?
there's I'm terrible. There's thousands of them, or at least hundreds of them. I mean, one of the first cases I did out of law school, she was a mother of five. She was sitting in a vehicle on the highway, and she was rear-ended, and the seat back on her car collapsed. So the seat fell backwards. She ramped up the back and hit her head on the frame of the window in her vehicle.
Wow.
And she was in one of the lower end models of vehicles made by this large auto manufacturer. And the teeth, so it turned out that the teeth, in the seat back, they sheared and it caused the seat back to collapse.
Hmm.
Well, it turns out that in the more expensive vehicles, that component is stronger.
Mm.
And the price differential between the two is in the single dollar difference.
Oh my gosh.
And we, and as it turns out, she wasn't the first person to have been severely injured by this problem. Well, through the course of discovery, we learned that they knew that this was, I mean, it's like the Pinto Ford, the Ford explosion things.
Hmm.
They've got bean counters, and they say, how much is it going to cost us to recall and fix this problem?
Hmm.
And it's cheaper to just pay a claim when a claim comes up,
Right.
right?
Wow.
Which is
That's
their
awful.
their business judgment, but the only place we can hit them is in the pocketbook. And so this mother of five, who was severely injured when her seat back collapsed, she ramps up, she's in a coma for 30 days, and then she spends the next 18 months learning to feed herself again, learning to walk again.
Oh.
Her husband, who was a high executive at a Fortune 500 company, has to take a sabbatical for 6 months to care for his wife. And all of the things that they used to do, like, go hike up waterfalls in Jamaica and travel around the world, they couldn't do anymore. And so that was one of the first cases that I had coming out of law school,
The
that I got to
first
work on.
case.
And it was, it changed what I wanted to do with my career. Uh,
Wow. Wow.
and so I mean, that's one of 100.
I can tell you right now, and I can just imagine some of the faces. And thank you so much for sharing that story, because it changes the way that you look at civil litigation. A lot of times when people think, I want to change the world, I want to have an impact on people's lives, they're thinking, I have to be, a civil rights attorney, which civil rights activism is so important. Let me just go on the record to
Absolutely.
say that.
I'll tell you right now, the firm that I'm at, we have a partnership with Ben Crump, who is representing all of the, I don't know if y'all know who he is, but he's representing all of the families, Breonna Taylor's family, George Floyd's family. He's representing them in all of their civil liability cases. And
Wow.
he just settled with the city of Louisville for $12 million for Breonna.
12 million. I saw that.
Yeah,
I saw it for Breonna
family.
Taylor's family. Yes. Yes. And that's what I'm saying. You can make such a huge impact, such a huge difference. And like you said, you're forcing them to change the way that they create and sell products. You're forcing them to change the way that they market to people.
Sure. But outside of the $12 million, more importantly here, I'm going to take a second. I'm going to pull this up real quick because this is
please.
Really, let me see if I still have it up. Anyway, go ahead, answer. I'll still answer questions. I just want to find this because in addition to that, there were some other remedies, like they all have to wear body cameras now, not just in certain situations. Mm-hmm. And there were certain things that the Louisville Police Department is going to implement because of this that were a result of the lawsuit. It's not all about the money. It's about what you make them do in the future.
The change.
So a good friend of mine who officed next to me represented the family of a little boy who, in the play school workbenches, this little 2.5-year-old boy had one of the screws, and he had it in his mouth, and he was running, chasing his other brother, fell, it lodged in his throat, and he choked on it and died. Okay, so listening to the 911 call from the mother was horrific. She was screaming so loud that the EMS, who lived 2 houses down, heard her and came to rescue. They finally got it out, but it was too late. The boy died. He was the second one to have died from this. Well, what do they do now? They drill holes through those plastic screws and the plastic nails that they get with the workbench because of that. I mean, it makes a safer product. It's not about the money that the boy or the boy's family received. It's about making changes so that it doesn't happen to somebody else. Oh, that's the important part of it.
That's gut wrenching. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, so I'll let you look up what you were trying to look up, but there was a question in the chat. Oh my gosh, Michael, you're trying to make me cry today. I wasn't expecting this today. The question is, as far as being an advocate, how important would you say it would be for an aspiring attorney to learn Spanish, especially considering how the demographic of Texas the demographics of Texas are expected to change over the next 30 years. They also, he commented on the change from Breonna Taylor. He said that they also banned no-knock warrants. So yes, I will let you take that.
Very. Well, I mentioned that earlier. Yes. Learn another language, whether it's Spanish, Japanese, Vietnamese, whatever it is. And I'll tell you, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier. There are underrepresented people out there who can. So in what I do, 90% of what I do is on a contingency fee basis, where if we don't recover, something, then you don't pay anything. Right. But you have these families who come in and they don't know where else to go. We're their, abogado. You can help so many people. So right now, the firm that I'm at, we're investigating, I don't know if y'all have heard or read about it, but the Georgia Detention Center, where they were performing the unnecessary hysterectomies on the illegal, on the detainees.
Yes, I heard about this. Okay, that's disgusting.
So it is. But we wouldn't be able to help those people if we didn't have Spanish-speaking lawyers in our office.
Wow. And that's something to think about. A lot of the people that need help in these situations can't get it because they just they can't ask for it, or they ask and no one can understand their case. You said your firm, the Corpus Christi firm, is working on that case?
Yeah, so we have an active, so the principal at our firm, um, he's done very well. So he's you know he's made a lot of money over the course of his career, and now he is in the what can I do to create a legacy,
Yes.
so to speak. So we're we're looking right now at bank racism cases where a woman goes into this bank and she's trying to cash a check, and they're questioning her because of her race. Like, why are you trying to cash this check?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you work? Why do you have this check? Why did they write you this check? And if I walk into a bank with a check for $100, they're cashing my check. They don't ask me those questions. But this, poor African American bartender who just got a check for $100 from her boss, gets grilled over it. Well, as it turns out, as we deep dive into this, there are multiple incidences of racism at this particular bank, and then it led us to look at other cases in other banks, and it's a huge problem. Um, so the same thing happens across the board. So you've got your African Americans who are discriminated against, Hispanics who are discriminated against. So if you didn't have somebody who spoke Spanish, you would lose something in the translation. And I feel that all the time. Like, I'm not fluent in Spanish. I can understand a little bit. I can speak a little bit. We have several Spanish-speaking lawyers at the firm, and I have a Spanish-speaking paralegal. But I still know that I'm losing something in that translation.
Right. Right.
I
Well,
think it would
so,
be very good if anybody on here was fluent in whatever language of their potential clients. I think it's a huge asset.
y'all have that answer. Learn another language. You don't have to major in the language, but learn another language. I agree that it's incredibly impactful, and you really can make an even bigger mark or an even bigger difference in whatever practice area you choose just by.
Especially with the change in demographics of Texas.
Yes, exactly. And I think that was his point that he brought up. So, great questions, guys. You guys are really adding to the dynamic of the conversation by just asking these simple questions. So, thank you. Please continue to ask these questions. We still
You
have
know,
a few
and
more
I'll tell
minutes
you,
left.
I can read Spanish. Okay, my speaking is not great. I know enough that if I got dropped off in Mexico for a week, I could survive.
Hmm.
But so my intake department sent me this factual summary of a case yesterday from a Spanish speaking client, and she did her translation. But I read what the client emailed in, and I know that there were things that were not
Sad.
carried over in the translation. So if I relied 100% on her translation, I would miss a couple of things that were sent in the email.
Hmm.
But I understood enough of the email and in my ability to read Spanish that I could call her and say, okay, well, what does he mean by this? Can you follow up with this? Give him a call and ask him these questions.
Well, do you
Uh,
know, it's funny. That's one of the things I remember at some point during law school, I inquired as to the difference between, hiring a Spanish interpreter versus hiring a Spanish translator. And they said the difference is in the exact accuracy. If you're asking for someone to translate, they're supposed to translate verbatim what is said versus interpreter, they're kind of paraphrasing or changing it to fit the flow of the conversation or colloquial speech, whatever. But a translator is meant to give you exactly what is being said. So
yeah, and then the document translation as opposed to the intent.
right, exactly. Well, good. I these questions that the students are giving are probably better than some of the are not probably they're better than some of the ones that I know I kind of sent you. So um man, well, so I guess I don't see any other questions in the chat. I'm just gonna pop back. I know you have a family, and so a lot of students that I see on a daily basis also have families or will have families by the time they get to law school or get into legal practice. So, how do you maintain work-life balance? How I know that's really important. A lot of people are when they speak to me, they're afraid to go into law practice because they're afraid that they're not going to be able to maintain a good work-life balance. So what is your trick? What's your secret? Or what is the secret?
Demand it, and maybe I'm a little. I don't know. But I demand it. I mean, it's that simple. And maybe I'm a little privileged in being able to say that because, you know, I've put in 20 years and I can demand it. I don't know if immediately coming out of law school, I would have felt comfortable doing it. But it, you know, at the time it wasn't really a concern. Um, but I do know people who have gone, like, so the guy that transferred from South Texas to U of H, number 2 in our class, he was married with a kid at the time, in going to law school. The guy who was down the office from me that, you know, represented the family of the boy who choked on the plastic screw. He had a family at the time. He went to law school, and, you know, we were friends through law school. So um, he was able to get through, managed just fine. We ended up working at the same firm together, and then we both separated from that firm at different times. I left before he did, and then when he left, he came over in office in the same building that I was at.
Mm.
But he had a family through law school. It can certainly be done. I'm sure it's probably more challenging. I guess the key would probably be to have a supportive spouse and understand that there are times. So he explained it to me. I'll give you his words. There are times when family comes first, and there are times when law school comes first, and you just have to be on the same page with your spouse as to when those happen. Like, you know, I've got a test that I need to study for, and it's my wife's birthday. Well, is my wife going to be okay if we celebrate her birthday on Saturday instead of her exact birthday?
Right.
I mean, I think the answer to that should be yes, but, you know, if you have a spouse who doesn't support that, then you're going to have a real challenge.
Yes. And that's definitely something that you have to talk to, you know, if you, anybody that's got a boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever that you're with, you know, definitely talk about that beforehand. You know, I think you have to have somebody that's supportive and in your corner. And, you know, if y'all are just dating and they clearly don't support law school, you know, bye bye.
I would 100% agree with that. Cut them loose.
Yeah, because you know, honestly, you know what Michael has said is so critical. You have to have people that are in your corner that are supporting you. And let's say it's not spouse, let's say it's family. You know, my mother, love her. She, you know, still wanted to see me and see me participating in family functions and things, you know, during law school, and that was difficult. I had to tell her no sometimes, but like you said, it's about time management and identifying when you can do what. I do have a question about work-life balance here. How would
Um,
work-life balance work with? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you saying something?
no, I can read it. I'm looking
Oh,
at the chat question. So I'm
oh, great.
actually looking at the next 2 chat questions that came up, and I love both of those questions.
Oh, great. Go for it.
So the work-life balance for going to a big firm right after law school. So the guy that graduated, I don't want to say because it might give up too much information. So I have a friend who graduated the same year that I did and went to work for a major law firm, big law firm, you know, 500 to 1,000 lawyers. And he did it and he could have gone anywhere. And he left that firm after 18 months. And he was a single guy. And it seemed like it was ideal because you go, you get the experience, you get the big firm starting salary. I mean, I think his starting salary out of law school in 1999 was close to 200 grand a year. But he left after 18 months because it killed him. He had no social life. They tell you that the billable hour requirements, you know, 2,100 hours a year, which translates to you're working 3,000 hours a year, because by the time the partner cuts your hours, you know, it just killed him. He was not able to have any relationships. He was traveling all the time because he was in mergers and acquisitions, spent a lot of time in New York on M&A stuff, and just had to leave it. So I know people who have managed going to big firms out of law school. I don't know any of them that are still there, if that helps. I know a lot of people who have left big law firms. They go, but that's not to knock them, because you can go and you can make a lot of money and get those student loans taken care of, you know, more quickly. I don't know if it's worth it, but that's my personal opinion. You know, I don't know anybody who started at a big law firm that is still at a big law firm 20 years later.
Hmm. Oh, well.
I don't know
So,
many that stayed longer than 5 or 6, actually.
well, so then I guess the second part of the question is, would you encourage people to steer clear of them?
I don't know. It depends on what your end game is. I mean, if you want to go be a partner at a big law firm, the only way to do it is to go to a big law firm and, stay the course. Um, I can tell you that 90% of the cases that I have are against big law firms.
Hmm.
And, you know, I don't know that the lawyers there are any better than the lawyers that I see on the other side from the mid-sized litigation boutique firms. I'll say that those lawyers are probably typically better than the solo lawyers that I see. Um, I'd go to like a mid-sized firm. I mean, I'd go somewhere that you're looking at lawyers between 10 and 50. I think that's a good number. I mean, one of my fishing buddies is a partner at a litigation firm, and we were talking the other night, I think they have 45 lawyers, 10 partners, and they're a well-respected Houston firm. Um, I think that's a good number.
And again, this is
You
your
get a lot more
advice for
experience that way
students.
too.
Well, right. But this is your advice for students that are really, really concerned with work-life balance. Not necessarily generally should you steer clear of big firms.
Right.
Just if you're really,
That
really concerned with work-life balance,
that's
maybe
fair.
big firm isn't for you. Is that right?
That
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
Their billing requirements are ridiculous.
They are. That's one of the first things that, you find is synonymous with big firm, billable hours. So,
So
um,
the guy that I just convinced to come over to work for me from a
big
defense
firm.
firm, like I said earlier, he's got 12 to 15 years of defense work in his background. So I'm driving back from Dallas the other day, and we're talking about some cases on over the phone because I'm having him pull them up because I'm driving, and I
Right.
can't look at the case descriptions and stuff. So I'm having him pull them up. We're discussing them on the phone, and we're on the phone for like an hour and a half. And he goes, "Well, I guess I got to get back to the grind, right? And get to work." And I go, "What do you think you've been doing for the past hour and a half?" And he goes, "Oh my God, you're right. Normally when we're talking, it's just like talking and having fun. I don't have to go bill somebody for this time." And I go, "No,
Right.
you don't." He has no more billable hour requirement. And
Oh, wow.
it's refreshing to him. It's like a breath of fresh air. We had lunch yesterday. Like we had an actual physical in-person lunch. And so I hired a paralegal remotely. Never met the guy. Met him for the first time yesterday. And um, but like lunch yesterday, we had a 2-hour lunch, but it was work, and
Was
nobody
on
has
your
to,
back.
nobody feels like you have to go log that time,
Right.
and that's the best part of being a solo, I think. I mean, I still put in 60, 70 hours a week, but I don't have to go report to somebody those 60 or 70 hours a week.
Yeah, it's hard when you've got somebody just watching over your shoulder and what are you doing and are we getting paid for that time and well, and it sounds like I am against it. I'm not against it. I just, I again we're in the same family of solo, so I completely relate to how you feel about it. So this last question that we have, and if anybody wants to get in one or two last questions, now's the time because we're about to close our presentation for the day. But and you can see it. It says you said you spent more time at UTA than you planned. Did you struggle with feeling like you're not on track slash having fallen behind? And if so, what advice would you have given yourself? So, now on the other side of it, would you look back and say, all right, this is what you should be doing, or this is how you can feel better about your UTA experience?
Never. So I'll tell you, enjoy your experience there. Um, I had this conversation. So I've got a 16-year-old daughter. She'll be 16 in 9 days. This conversation with her yesterday on the pressure that you put on yourself. Um, don't compare yourself to anyone else and what they're doing with their lives. Take where you are and do the best you can with what you have, and what your goal is. Don't make somebody else's goal your goal. Um, have goals, strive, be better than you are today, but don't make your goal have to, what you think somebody else says it should be. Could I work harder and have more money and do all of those things? Of course I could. But I'm sitting in my house at my office right now. My wife just walked by and looked in to see what I was doing. My 8-year-old is running around with her iPad, in between classes. My 13-year-old is upstairs on a Teams meeting with his class. My 16-year-old's at probably the top private school or one of the top private schools in Houston. And I live in West U. Do I need more? Do I need a boat? Do I need a plane? Do I need, a lot of the things that some of my friends have? No, I don't.
I need them, so give them to me, Michael.
I'm happy doing what I do. I went fishing with a buddy of mine the other night. I could log off this call and go roam around and go biking with my kid for an hour if I wanted to, instead of having to worry about billing and making another, X $100 and, for missing that hour. Live your life and do what you want to do and find your happiness. And, every day above ground is a good day, and just try to make it better.
I love that. Words to live by. Words to live by. Okay, so I think that's actually a perfect place to end it. I do see one more question.
Will mental health deteriorate during law school?
Yes. But
Wow.
you can get it back.
No, I don't think it does. I think it actually got better. And again, I'm biased to where I went, but I really feel like I had parents that care. And I'm gonna share some personal stuff. So my first year of law school, my father passed away, and I actually thought about taking a semester off. And I went and I talked to a couple of my professors, and so not only did my father pass, there were some financial strains that came with that as well. And I went and I talked to my contracts professor, and I had amajored my contracts 1 class, and so we had a good relationship. And I said, I think I'm going to take some time off because I just have to deal with this. He goes, you know what? That's your decision, but I'll tell you, we're here to support you with whatever you need. If you need to delay, if you need to delay your exams, we're happy to do whatever we need you to do, whatever you feel like you need to do. But I think staying the course and staying on track is probably in your best interest because you've got a lot of really good momentum going. So, if you have that type of support, I don't think the mental health issue is a problem at all. So in going to the financial part, I ended up having to sell back textbooks for money because I was literally at the end of like the financial part of it. My father had died, my mother was struggling, and one of my professors said, "Here, take my book," and it had, it was his actual textbook, and it had his notes on, on the class and everything. And I said, Professor so-and-so, I don't think I can take this because it gives me an unfair advantage, right? It's annotated. And he said, then don't read the annotations. It was that trusting, right? It was, then don't read the annotations. But if I tell you not to read them, I trust that you're not going to do it. And, you need this book, so take it and, go well and conquer. I think your mental health will be fine. Y'all are on this Zoom because presumably you have an interest in going into law school and becoming lawyers. So all I would say is, don't let anything stand in your way.
I love this guy. Wow. Well, I'm gonna say thank you because I think that's such a wonderful. You've given the students not only some sage advice for law school, for practice, for advocacy generally, but just kind of just about being a good human. And I really love all the things that you've had to say and share this afternoon with the students. So I'm going to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing your afternoon with us. I know you're incredibly busy.
Sorry, I keep glancing down because like stuff just keeps popping up,
I
and I
think
just
they're
keep
saying
hitting
thank
decline,
you.
decline, decline, or just scrolling through it. Um,
but but yes, so all I would strongly encourage you to keep up with Mr. Watson if you can, and you know, we're all going to be wishing you the very, very best
and
with your
I'm,
practice.
you know, you can share my email address with anybody at UTA that is looking at going to law school or has questions.
Oh,
They can just email me.
absolutely.
I mean, I'm happy to.
Absolutely. Well, anyone that asks for it, all y'all have to do is email me if you would like to keep up with Mr. Watson, or if you have additional questions for him beyond the time that we have today. But I thank you guys for joining us, and thank you, Michael. You just thank you so much.
Yeah,
You're
sure.
fantastic. All right, guys.
Let me know
We'll
if y'all need
see y'all
anything.
next time.
Good
Have a
luck to you.
good,
Good luck to you all.
thank you. Bye bye, y'all.